Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. My name is Carey Nieuwhof, and my goal is to help you lead like never before. So what I do every week is I sit down with world-class leaders and church leaders, business leaders, and I talk to them about what made them who they are and try to have the conversation with them that you would have if you got to sit down for lunch with them or have dinner with them or really got to spend some time with them. So we go into the backstory and we explore what made them who they are and some of the principles they've learned along the way. So if you enjoy this episode, I would love for you to like it, to subscribe, and also to share it with your friends. And in the meantime, here's today's episode.
We'll go on in here. Okay, now, if you know, sometimes one book can open the door to a whole lot of other things in your life. So if you know purpose-driven life, it can open the door. Go ahead, Carey. Hit the button. Yeah, hit it again.
Okay.
There you go. Then it opens the door to a whole new library of wonder. But go on in. Go all the way to the end, guys. Go all the way in, guys. Go all the way to the end. So let me explain this.
Wow.
My father was a pastor for 50 years and was on the staff of a seminary. My mother was a librarian and a seminary bookstore manager. So they taught me to have a love for books. I started collecting at 14 and I read a book a day for many, many years. Most of my life I was reading a book a day. You say, well, how did you do that? Little tiny books with lots of pictures and big print. Okay, but
are you a skim reader? Fast reader?
I am a very fast reader.
Yeah.
And so I have, again, 2 Guinness Book of World Records in this library. Over here, this is a sign from the certificate from the Guinness thing. Yeah, and it's actually out of date now. They sent, look at this, Carey. See this? Gold dot, gold dot, gold dot, gold dot, gold dot. See those?
Yeah.
Any book that has a gold dot means it's signed by the author. So I now have over 4,000 books signed by authors.
Did you get mine?
I have. Yes, I do. I have. Good. And so you're now in the Guinness Book of Records, and but you have to sign every one of them, then you'll be in it. I have Luther's commentary on Galatians, signed by Luther. I have a little booklet called Some Friendly Advice to Our Brothers in the Colonies.
Oh my goodness.
It's written in 1776. It's a little tract written to the pastors of America saying, don't revolt against King George. And it's hand-signed John Wesley.
Wesley?
Yeah, Wesley. Wesley wrote it. This is Charles Spurgeon's music stand. Spurgeon was the greatest pastor of the 19th century. He pastored in London. 10,000 people came to the Metropolitan Tabernacle, including Queen Victoria. This was his music stand. He called his music team the War Department because they were always fighting over worship wars 100 years ago. This is John Harvard. This is my doctoral dissertation. This is John Harvard, the pastor who gave the money and his library to start Harvard University. Yeah. What most people don't know is that of the 13 Ivy League schools, every one of them except Cornell was started by pastors to train pastors. This is the original oil painting of Charles Spurgeon, the pastor I was telling you about, the greatest pastor of the 19th century. This guy led my great-great-grandfather to Christ and sent him to America as a church planter. That's why Warrens are here. This is a Roman traducta. It's 2,000 years old. This is the coin where Jesus said, show me a coin. Whose picture's on it? And there he is. There's Julius Caesar. Okay. He said, well, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Okay. So that would be a coin. That's the kind of coin Jesus would have held 2,000 years ago. That's like AD 6. So don't put that in a slot machine or something.
No parking meter.
No parking meter for that. Exactly. Now it's interesting. I've got another one here, but it's not here right now. But the Emperor Theodosius in the 4th century was the first one to put a Christian coin, a cross on Roman coins. And in 400 years, it had gone from Caesar to a cross, which is a cool story. This is The Purpose-Driven Life, one of 4 volumes in Braille. So you feel that.
Oh, wow.
Feel that? See that?
My goodness.
And it's just the bumps. This is a book, and it's part of a movie we made called To Every Nation, the story of one church going to every nation by the end of 2010. Every 10 years, we have a decade goal in our church. And between 2000 and 2010, our goal was, I was talking to our people one day, I said, Jesus said, go make disciples of every nation. Has any church ever done that? Has any single church in 2,000 years actually gone to every nation? Well, we had started this thing called the Peace Plan. Plant churches, equip leaders, assist the poor, care for the sick, educate the next generation. I said, why don't we be the first church to go to every nation? And the people said, let's go, let's do it. So over the next decade, I sent out 26,869 of my members to 197. I pastor a church of missionaries. Okay? Now, they're not the same church they were before that. Because once you've been to Botswana and seen poverty, you don't care about a tennis bracelet anymore. It just changes your values. I pastor a church of missionaries. We're the only church in 2,000 years to go to every nation. On October 26, 2010, October 18th, a couple months before the decade ended, we went to nation. First place, I didn't know how many nations there were. Yeah. I had to look it up. Yeah. There are 197 nations in the world. There are 195 part of the UN. The only 2 nations not in the UN are Serbia and Taiwan. So we said we'll be in all 197 nations by the end of the decade. And on October 18th, 2010, we went to nation 197. It's called St. Kitts. Little island in the Caribbean, only 35,000 people. But we went there, we planted a church, equipped leaders, assisted the poor, cared for the sick. So we came back, we wrote a book. This book is the pictures of our 26,000 people that they took in every nation. Winning people to Christ in every nation. And we made a movie of it too. This is one of my most prized possessions. One time President Bush asked me to do the prayer at his inauguration. And so I said, sure. So I prayed. It was so stinking cold. It was snowy, sitting outside. It was freezing cold. I told Kay, if I ever get asked to do this again, I got to get a hat. 4 years later, I'm literally sitting on a plane. I get a call from then Senator Barack Obama. And he says, Rick, I want you to do the prayer for my inauguration. I then said, I got to get a hat. So where do you go? They said, you got to go up to Hollywood, West Hollywood, to a place called Mad Hatter's. And that's where all of the Orthodox Jews get their fedoras. And I spend like $300 for it, and I know I'm never going to wear this again. Okay, I'm not a hat guy, okay? But I get it. So I take it to a hotel that I'm staying up actually in Beverly Hills because that day I was doing a Bible study for Hollywood producers. But when I finally went back to the hotel to get my stuff, my hat had been stolen. Oh. Everything else was there, but just a hat, brand new hat, never worn, and a hat box is stolen. So I'm going, where am I going to get a hat? And I'm cheap enough, I wasn't going to go buy another one. I still, to this day, don't know how he found out. But one of my mentors that I'd met when I was 18 years old, he took me under his wing and trained me for 50 years. He wrote me a note, and a handwritten note, and I open up, here's this hat, and it says, Dear Rick, I wore this hat to 11 presidential elections. I love you like a son. You're the man now. It's your time. It's your day. Wear the hat, Billy. This is Billy Graham's hat. Okay, this is Billy Graham's hat. So then I go, oh God, please don't make my head be too big for Billy Graham's hat. I couldn't handle the shame. Warren has such an ego that he couldn't fit in Billy Graham's hat. So I actually took it into a hotel room, into the bathroom, and put it on, and it fit. So I wore it to a 12th inauguration. Now here's the cool, funny part of this story. So at this inauguration, this is the largest inauguration of a president in history. 1 million people. The night before, I had gone to a banquet with 4,000 African-American Christian leaders, and I'm the only white guy there. The only white guy there, invited. And so, because I'm praying the prayer the next morning. So, at the inauguration, There's 1 million people out there in the Capitol Mall looking on. On the front row, here's the Bush family, and here's the Obama family. That's the front row. Second row is all the former presidents. Clinton, Bush 1, Carter, all the different presidents of the past on there. Third row, sitting next to me, is Chief Justice Roberts, who's going to do the oath, me, who's going to do the prayer, my wife, Kay, and the rest of the row is all Secret Service, watching the front 2 rows. So we got the best seats in the house. I mean, you can't get better seats. Now, sitting right behind me, who's going to sing the national anthem, is Aretha Franklin. Aretha is wearing a hat that's about this tall. It looks like Marge Simpson's hair. It's like straight up. What was funny is they took this 360-degree panorama photo of what 1 million people looked like at that inauguration. And I don't know what happened, but somehow I wasn't wearing the hat at that time. And in the official photo that came out, the panorama photo, it's got a clear picture of Chief Justice Roberts. He's real clear. Kay's real clear on this side. Billy Graham's hat is suspended out here in space, up in the air. Okay? And then it's my body up to my neck, and on top of my neck is Aretha Franklin's hat. So you can't see my face in the official photo. Anyway, that was the fast tour.
Fast tour.
Yeah.
Rick, I've been excited about this time
Hey, buddy.
for a while.
Glad to be together.
Well, we spent some time together already,
Yeah.
and today, and it's just great to have you. This is a momentous time. Last year, you announced that you would be stepping down, moving on to a new role, and I watched this video that you posted on YouTube. I think you originally did it for your staff.
I did.
Yeah, and you outlined 11 reasons why you decided to step back as the senior pastor, the only pastor so far of Saddleback.
Right.
Do you want to walk us through a couple of the key ones? We don't need all 11,
Sure.
just a couple of them.
Sure. Well, bottom line is there are human reasons, and then there's God's reason.
Right.
And the big reason, the God reason, is God is calling me to do something harder. He's calling me to go. I have prayed the same prayer every weekend for 42 years. As I drive to church on Saturday night, and as I drive to church on Sunday morning, I have quite a long, I call it my game day prayer. It kind of puts me in the mental mindset to do, 4, 6 or more services. And one of the things I've said every week for 42 years is, God, I offer my resignation to you. I've said that every Sunday, at least twice, on Saturday and Sunday, for 42 years. And as I'm driving down the road, I literally have a thing where I take my hands off the wheel on the freeway for a fraction of a second. Nobody else is supposed to know that. But I do, as a symbolism of I'm not in control.
Wow.
And what I say is, God, this is your church. You used me to start it, and I'm grateful, but it's not my church. It belongs to you. And not only does it belong to you, I belong to you. And so you have a right to move me if you want to. And so I give you permission with my resignation here to do anything you want. If there's somebody who can do a better job than I'm doing, if there's somebody who you need to take it in a different direction, I willingly step aside. And then the most important part of the prayer was this, and I'm willing to do something more difficult. Now, I've said that. I'm willing to do that something more difficult for 42 years because there are 1,000 things that would be easier to do than lead a large church of 30,000 people with campuses on 4 continents. It's incredibly complex, a staff of 500, and all of the movement stuff that we're involved in. So there are a lot of things that would be easier.
Yeah.
God took me up on my offer and gave me an assignment that's more difficult.
So, and that's a question. Why now? 42 years, all of a sudden, you're how old?
I'm 67.
Yeah.
And I when I started the church at 25, I publicly stood up and announced that I would give 40 years of my life at the very first service. Yeah. Now, that was a dumb thing. You shouldn't just announce a time because it wasn't a time from God. It wasn't a word of the Lord. It was the biggest number I could think of. I thought when you're 25, 65 sounds ancient.
If I make it that long.
If I make it that long, somebody else should probably take over by then.
Right.
But what I should have said was, guys, I'm here to stay. Lord willing, I'm not going to walk out on you when it gets tough.
Was that paradigm shifting back then? Because, go back to 1980. Right, in the tradition I was raised in, which was more mainline. I mean, if you had a 10-year pastor, that was forever.
Well, and as a Baptist pastor, it was even shorter.
Right.
Both my father and my father-in-law and my uncle were Baptist pastors, and you would stay in a church maybe 5 years.
Exactly.
And then you'd go somewhere else. And of course, if you're in a Methodist, they moved you intentionally because they didn't want you having long-term pastorates. Actually.
So why did you choose 40 years then?
Well, because I
know it was a big number, but why did you decide to stay for life?
There were a couple reasons. I'm glad you asked it. When I was in seminary, before I moved to California, one of the things that I did is I read every book in print on church growth at the time, which was 72 books at the time. And there are, of course, far more than that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's changed.
The second thing was it was a new category, church planting, and nobody knew about that. The second thing is I personally wrote to the 100 largest churches in the world. And I asked them a series of questions, and I asked them for a packet. Send me your bulletin, your constitution, your programs. And I would get these packets and unload them, and they filed them all. And I'm learning from others. What I discovered was a couple things. It takes all kinds of churches to reach all kinds of people. There's more than one way to grow a church. And if you're growing a church, I like the way you're doing it, whether it's my style or not. So anybody who tells you there's only one way to grow a church, they're wrong. They're just wrong. It depends on where you are and what you are. But there were two common denominators in every growing church.
Okay.
Every single growing church. One of them was the longer a pastor tends to stay, the stronger it tends to get. Now, that's if you've got integrity.
Integrity?
Okay. Yeah.
And a bit of momentum.
And if you keep going, let me come back to this in just a minute. But the other thing is the faith factor, and that is people are not afraid to believe God. Okay, that whether it's a small situation or a small town or I've started churches in 4 areas. I've started a rural church in my barn in a town of less than 500 people. I've been in an inner city church in a metropolitan area where I was a minority as a white. I've been in an international church plant in Nagasaki, Japan, and I've planted in suburbia. So whether inner city or rural or suburban or urban, the faith factor of the pastor is an important thing. But a lot of pastors, they forget, there's a story at the end of Purpose Driven Church where I talk about bamboo. The way you grow bamboo is this. You get a bamboo stick and you cut it up and you plant it and you water it for a year and nothing happens. And then you water it for a second year and nothing happens. And you water it for a third year and a fourth and a fifth year and nothing happens. And on the sixth year, nothing happens. And on the seventh year, you water it and one day it sprouts. And when bamboo sprouts, it grows very fast. It can grow a full meter overnight.
Wow.
Yeah. And some bamboo can grow 3 meters or 9 feet in a week. And they just explode. But they don't for a long time. A lot of guys out there are pastoring bamboo churches. And what they do is they've been watering year after year, and nothing's happening. And then along about year 7, they move, a new guy comes in, takes over, and then explodes, and he gets the credit. That is not fair. That is not fair, because they put all the work in to do it.
Okay, well, that was so helpful. And you and I, we both love like rabbit trails, excursions, and that kind of thing. So that's why you stayed. You decided this is a long assignment.
Yeah, well, as I said, one of the common denominators of the biggest churches is nobody had been there 2 years. In the largest churches, they had all been there for decades.
Right, gotcha.
Okay, and so I'm going to go. And so I actually asked the Lord, I said, Lord, I'm willing to go anywhere in the world. I told him this. I'm willing to go anywhere in the world. Okay, we thought we were going to be missionaries to China. And the Cultural Revolution shut that down in the 70s. And that was the biggest disappointment of my life. We thought we were going to China. We were willing
Why
to,
China?
I had been in Japan, and we had a heart for Asia. And I just thought this is the biggest country in the world. They're going to need lots of churches. And I thought they're going to need lots and lots of churches. But God shut the door on that. And he said, you're not going to be a missionary. You're going to be a missionary sending agency. Okay, which ended up being what was true. But because of that, I said, Lord, I'll go anywhere in the world if you'll give me the privilege of spending my entire life in one location. I have now pastored 6 generations, okay, from the great generation of World War II, okay, and then the silent generation, the buster generation, the boomer generation, the Gen X, the millennials, the Ys, the Zs, and now the alphas.
Yeah, they're coming up.
Okay, now the alphas. And so when I have people on my staff that were born in the church, I watched them not be born, but I watched them within seconds after their birth, and I've known them all their lives. When you have integrity and when you genuinely love people, it gets better every year. When you don't, it gets more difficult. And I'm not saying in productivity it gets better every year. I'm just saying your ministry becomes more solid every year. I'm not saying, well, if you just stay in a place, well, one day it's going to grow. The dirty little secret, friends, that nobody ever talks about this, the number one factor on the size of your church is your location. It's not your giftedness. Okay, I hate to tell you that.
So you're saying you picked some good property, or
exactly.
You picked a good area?
I picked a place where there was going to be growth. If I had stayed in Redwood Valley, where I grew up, I could have spent 40 years there, and the church would still be 35 people.
Because you're a village of 500 people.
Yeah,
right?
The shoe tells the foot how big it can get. And if if you put a goldfish in a small bowl, it's not going to grow. And yet we need churches in all of these villages.
Yeah. And
so this is not a slap. Clearly, we need more small churches than we need giant ones, because God made more of them. And so we talk about rabbit churches, and we talk about tiger churches, we talk about elephant churches. At Saddleback, we plant all 3 kinds. We've planted tens of thousands of rabbit churches, which are small groups. Anywhere else in the world, they're called house churches.
Right.
Only in North America, we call them small groups. Everywhere else, they're a house church. We have planted tens of thousands of house churches. We have 7,000 plus house churches in the Saddleback church system here in California. But then tiger churches are the churches between 75 and 150. And I call them tiger because they're almost impossible to destroy. Okay, the pastor can run away with the secretary, and the deacon run away with the money. They're not there for the sermon. They're there for the fellowship.
Right.
They're there for the relationship, and we need and then there's the elephant church, which is the megachurch. You do need mega churches in mega cities. That when they walk, they shake the ground, and it helps every other church. But you certainly don't want everybody to be that.
Right.
So rabbit churches, by the way, multiply fastest. And if we're going to win the world, we got to start more of those than anything else.
That's a good metaphor. Okay, so that's why you decided to stay for 4 decades.
For 4 decades.
But you listed 11 reasons.
Yes.
One of them was your health.
Yeah, one of them was my health, but that wasn't the biggest factor.
Okay.
The biggest factor for now was, one, God had called me to lead this movement called FTT, Finishing the Task. And I knew it was harder, and I knew I was gifted and trained, and I felt like everything else in my past had prepared me for this. Gotcha. And so that was it. But another thing is because the staff at Saddleback right now is the healthiest it's ever been. We haven't always been healthy. Every staff goes through ebbs and flows over the years. And in 42 years, there's sometimes when I was super happy with our staff. And there were sometimes I would wake up and go, how did I get all these people working with me? And where did they come from? And why are they cranky? And all that. But what happened in the last 2 years, COVID prepared my staff and actually prepared the church for my transition. And the way it did is this. Carey, one of the things leaders know is that when you're in a crisis like COVID, you over-communicate.
Right.
You actually communicate more than you did in normal times. So we went from a weekly staff meeting to a daily staff meeting. And we went from a weekly elder meeting to a daily elder meeting when COVID hit. Now, we couldn't meet together in person, so we used Zoom. But every day we would meet as elders, and every day we would meet as a staff. As the COVID went, and that started building the cohesiveness. And what it did was, in staff meeting, you often look at the back of people, the heads of people. But in staff meeting, in a Zoom, you're looking at everybody. And they can comment over the side, and they can write in the chat room. And it actually built camaraderie and koinonia and fellowship and deepened that. And so we got closer and closer and closer. We eventually went to 2 staff meetings a week, and then we went eventually back to 1. But the benefit of it had already taken place. And my staff is more engaged and more healthy than they've ever been in 42 years. Wow. So I feel very confident. If I were to drop dead right now, Saddleback, they don't need me to keep this thing going. They really don't.
See, that's a frequent, and you and I have done a few interviews over the last year or two, so we'll link to where we talked about finishing the task and all that. But that is a frequent criticism of megachurches, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times.
Oh, yeah.
Rick, what happens if you get hit by the bus?
Yeah, well, the answer is you have to be purpose-driven, not personality-driven. Personality-driven means when you're gone, attendance falls off. When you're gone, offerings fall off.
Right.
Okay? I was gone for 7 months when I wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. I between Christmas and July, I only preached twice in those 7 months. I preached Christmas and I preached Easter. I held no staff meeting. I was working 12 hours a day on writing that book, Purpose-Driven Life. While I was gone, we added 452 members, and the church did great.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pastors who are not
because we had structure for it.
Sure. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because there's a lot of pastors who aren't in that position. And I remember leading for a while.
Right.
When I preached, attendance was good. Things were good. If I took a vacation, it took a nosedive, and it took me a few years to figure that out.
Yeah.
What are some of the keys to making sure that, like, for the leader who's there right now, I got nobody?
Yes, right. Well, first, let me relieve a little bit of guilt. If you're planting a church, it does depend on you. Okay.
Right.
So, in the first 2 years of the church, if I had left, the church would have died.
Yep.
Okay. And you don't need to be ashamed of this in a church plant or in a new start, that it is all depending on you at the start. You just know this isn't where we want to be.
Right.
Okay. And I want to wean them of me. Okay. I want to wean them of me. Now, there are multiple ways you can do this. You can't do it quick. I can show you how to wean the church of your leadership, but I can't show you how to do it fast. Okay? It just is impossible. It takes time. And it has to do with both the preaching, okay? It has to do with recruiting of lay volunteers. It has to do with empowering and mobilizing. It has to do with setting up a system of discipleship that system keeps going even when you're sick. Okay. We didn't set that up overnight. I can tell you how to get to where we are, but it took me 42 years.
Yeah, and I was going to say, too, I mean, Purpose-Driven Church came out,
1995.
Years? 95. So 15 years into the life cycle of Saddleback.
Right.
You finally got to the point where you had systems in place.
We actually had the systems in place a little bit earlier. I did what a lot of guys don't do, is I waited 15 years to write my first book. Some guys started church, and a year later they're writing as an authority on how to do a book. I'm going, you might want to wait a while. I had trained over 40,000 pastors in personal seminars before I ever put it on paper. And so I was revising every PD conference. We'd been teaching PD conferences for 10 years, before I put it in a book. So when it went into a book, it wasn't like theory. It was like, we've been practicing this forever, and we've been changing it. We've been learning.
So the other big question that always comes up, especially with a Saddleback, is huge shoes to fill.
Yeah.
Like huge. Like number one, who wants the job?
Right.
Number two, who can do the job?
Right.
Is it a single person?
Right.
Is it a team of leaders? Is it that all your campuses become independent?
Right.
That's not just true of Saddleback. That's been a question so many people ask. How do you answer that?
One of my mentors was Peter Drucker.
Oh, yeah.
I started talking to Peter Drucker about my successor literally 20 years ago. Wow. Literally 20 years ago. I have notes from 20 years ago when I wrote down and I walked in and I said to Peter, Peter, I believe there's no success without a successor. I'm not anywhere near that, but help me start getting ready for it. He told me a number of different things that have been very helpful. One of them is, of course, that usually the successor needs to be somebody very different.
Okay, so you're not looking for a Rick clone.
No. In fact, the last thing Saddleback's needs is a poor image of me. Because everybody goes, he's not Rick. Well, nobody can be me, and nobody can be you, and nobody can be you. Okay? So you're one in the zillion, okay? You're a unique thumbprint, voice print, handprint, eye print. So nobody's going to replace you. Nobody's going to replace me. What a church often needs is something totally different than the direction it was going for. Now, sometimes, you can do an intentional interim. Okay, now this is an important point. Now, I'm not saying this for all the time, where you have somebody who will fill in, Moses is dead, but we don't have Joshua yet.
Right.
Okay, and when this person is an intentional interim, the people don't criticize that guy because they know he's not staying.
He's on his way out at some point.
He's just there to love the people. But it does give a healthy break. Oftentimes, after a founding leader, the second person who comes in is a sacrificial lamb. Okay, and they don't make it. I am determined that doesn't happen.
Right.
I want my successor to be more successful than me. I want me, he must increase and I must decrease. Okay, and I'm more than happy for that. As I said, when you've offered your resignation every Sunday for 42 years, this is not a new stress.
So how do you make sure that's not a hit on your ego? We all have ego at some level. Like the whole idea the church got better when I left.
Yeah.
How do you make sure, how do you become secure enough to want that?
The way you need to want it is to look at your church like a garden. Let me give you an example. I'm a gardener. Someday I'm going to write a book on everything I learned about leadership I learned in my garden. Okay, I grow 56 kinds of vegetables and 17 kinds of fruit. And I get in the dirt and I've learned more. One of the things that every year when my harvest is over and everything's done, what I'm most satisfied with is not the harvest of that year, but knowing that year I enriched the soil a little bit more. I was putting in compost, I was putting in nutrients, I was enriching the soil. When I first started planting my garden, it was bare clay and almost ungrowable. Almost ungrowable. But I started enriching the soil every year. Enriching the soil is more important than the harvest because it means that the next year your crops will be better. And next year. I have been enriching the soil at Saddleback for 42 years so that anybody who comes in and plants seed, they ought to grow. They really ought to grow because we have such bench strength in not just our staff, but in literally our members, of volunteers.
But how does that deal with any insecurity you might feel? Like, let's say Saddleback goes 3x the size of when you led it. There's something inside me, right, that says, well, why didn't that happen under me?
No. I'm the exact opposite.
Good.
I'm going, what I don't want it to do is go to nothing.
There's that.
Okay, that it went down after me, which meant it was more personality driven than you thought.
Right.
Okay, so nothing would thrill me more than Saddleback to grow. Okay, so that's it. But the more important point is, where are you getting your self-identity? Are you getting your worth from your work? Are you getting your worth from the applause of other people? Or is your identity in Christ? And if your identity is truly in Christ, and we all preach on this, but it doesn't mean that you emotionally get it.
Right.
Okay? And this is one of the big issues is we don't emotionally get what we even preach ourselves. Is that God is God. And if God likes me and I like me, if you don't like me, what's your problem? Okay? I don't need your approval to be happy. Yeah. But the truth is, a lot of us in ministry, we are people pleasers. We do care about approval. We do want the applause. And the first step in getting over that addiction is to admit it. Okay, and to just go, you know what? Part of me really likes praise. Well, who doesn't?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, there's nobody on the planet Earth who doesn't like praise. But I always say, praise is kind of like chewing gum. You chew on it for a while, but you don't swallow it. Okay? That when you're running your race, and that's what ministry is, it's a marathon, and we need you to make it to the end. When you're running your race, there are people in the stands that give both cheers and jeers. You got to ignore them both. They both will cause you to stumble, to fall, and not make it to the finish line. Now, let me just pause here. Now, I know I'm chasing a rabbit, but thank you, Carey, for letting me chase a rabbit.
It's long-form podcasting, right?
Long-form podcast. Pastors, I know it's the end of the year, and it's been a tough 2 years, and it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to get discouraged. I want to say to you, pastors, first, your ministry matters to God, and it has nothing to do with the size of it. A pilot who's piloting 4 people is just as responsible to get those souls to safety as a pilot piloting a plane of 400. Can one guy be less concerned because he only has 4 people on his plane? No, they're souls, and you're given the responsibility to get them to the destination safely.
That's a good point.
So this has nothing to do with size. But if you're going to last in ministry, you got to realize a couple things. Somebody is going to be upset with you every moment of your life. And if you let that get under your skin, you'll never be happy. Because I am constantly aware that every second of my life I'm disappointing somebody.
Yep.
Okay? Because just about the time you get crowd A pleased, crowd B gets ticked off. Okay, and then you get them pleased, and you can't, even God can't please everybody. This week, somebody's praying for 2 different sports teams to win. Who is God going to favor? Okay, some are praying for rain, and some are praying for sun. Even God can't please everybody. Only a fool would try to do that. So this is important that you realize part of being in ministry means you're going to have to deal with disapproval. You're going to have to deal with criticism, and you're going to have to deal with disappointment, that people get disappointed in you. You can't let that. What other people think of you is none of your business.
So, on that note, that's the question I wanted to ask you. You have taken your share of criticism over the years.
A little.
Yeah, a little bit, Rick. And you still got a smile on your face all these years later. Yeah. I mean, from... you took a lot of flack from the Christian community over deciding that AIDS was the 21st century leprosy.
Yes.
We ought to care for people because that's what Christians do.
Yeah.
You spoke at several presidential inaugurations. You prayed, I should say, and you were criticized by some on the left. And then when you were at Obama's and accepted, you were criticized by Christians.
Right.
There have been all kinds of things said about you over the years. How do you respond? What is your internal narrative on that?
Yeah. Well, if the criticism is true, you listen and learn from it.
Yeah. What would be an example of criticism that you would say?
Well, sometimes people will criticize me about something that's partially true.
Okay.
And so I work on the 5% that's partially true, even though they're 90% wrong. See, here's the difference. Critics don't realize they're actually enhancing your ministry if you receive it correctly. For instance, there are a lot of people who criticize me on social media. I have never criticized anybody on social media, ever. I will never fight back. I am most like Christ when I refuse to retaliate. The Bible says Jesus was criticized constantly, and it says he spake not a word unto them. When Pilate, when they challenged him, and you've done this, they accused him of all kinds of stuff that was false. He would not dignify them with that. I was a while back criticized by a well-known pastor who's written a couple books against me. And he's never met me. He's never been to Saddleback. He doesn't even know what we're doing. I have never said a bad word about him ever, and I won't. And somebody wrote me on Twitter, somewhere said, so-and-so pastor said this about you, what do you think about them? And I said, well, I have nothing but the utmost respect for this pastor and his ministry, and what he thinks of me in no way controls what I think of him. Bam. Now,
wow.
Here's the thing. When you respond with a blessing, when you bless those who curse you, instead of defending yourself, instead of trying to get even and try to top them, trying to point out something bad in their life, you just eat it. Leadership absorbs the pain. You just eat it. I'm most like Christ when I refuse to retaliate.
Did you have to learn that?
Oh, absolutely. And I had to learn it by experience. In fact, there was a time in my life when I was going through so much criticism, and I go, God, why? Why are you allowing this criticism? He goes, because I want you to be able to teach others.
Oh, man.
Okay, I want you to be able to teach, because every pastor is afraid of criticism.
So what would that do to you in those early days as you were figuring that out? Like
well,
sleepless nights,
of course. In the early days, you worry about it, and when you worry about it, you make a criticism bigger and bigger and bigger. Someday I'm going to write a book just on criticism, the little lessons that I've learned.
I will buy that book.
The little lessons I've learned, and the point is, here's the thing: when somebody criticizes you, and you just smile, and you don't retaliate, and you respond with joy and with love, God, it anoints you more. You actually get more anointing by passing the criticism test. Now, when people criticize me, I learn from them if there's anything to learn. You could learn from anybody if you know the right questions. I learn from them. They never learn from me. Never, which makes me smarter than them. So they don't realize they're actually making you more effective. And the more they hit you, the more effective you are. And when you respond with Christ-likeness and you return blessing for love and love for anger and criticism, God just says, that's my boy. And he pours out more anointing on you. And you actually end up with more anointing than before the criticism. Critics don't realize how much they've given me more anointing from God.
Well, this is super helpful. So do you have people who are watching what people are saying about you online, or you just wait if it eventually trickles out?
If it trickles out. Here's the thing. I honestly believe that social media is a stumbling block to most people in ministry. I really do. Because we're caught up in the moment of the dopamine hits from likes. And you post, and the moment you post it, you're ready. Is anybody gonna like it? Anybody gonna like it? Anybody gonna like it? Anybody gonna like it? Oh, I got a like. And you get that dopamine hit. That is addicting.
Yep.
Okay, now, I have 12 million followers on social media. And I post almost nothing. Almost nothing. In the last week, I posted more than I posted in the last 3 years. Because I just don't do it. Partially is because on something like Twitter, you can't have no context.
Right.
And so no matter what I say, the sky is gray. Somebody will come back and say, well, why are you against gray? Okay. And you must be a bigot against gray. Okay. And I just said the sky was gray. Okay. So I really think you need to pay less attention. Get your face out of Facebook and get your face in the book. That's what you need to do to be an effective pastor.
Would you feel, because you and I have the advantage of having a pre-digital memory.
Yeah.
We remember what it was like when
it
was really hard to get information, like we were talking about earlier. If you were starting over again, you're 25 years old.
Yeah.
Would you use social media?
Yes, but not the way it's being used right now.
Oh, so how would you do it?
The way many, I don't say all, many young pastors think that the way they grow their church is by appearing to be cool.
Okay.
And they have gotten lost between legitimate marketing and legitimate messaging of the good news and self-promotion. And so they're posting pictures of themselves in this, my so-called wonderful life, thinking if everybody thinks I'm a cool pastor, more people will come. I will tell you this. You will attract what you are. And if you are that shallow, you will attract a church full of shallow, self-centered people who are worried about what they think. You will attract whatever you are. And the way to grow a church is not by impressing people by how cool you are. You don't help anybody with your successes. You only help them with your failures, your weaknesses, and your problems. If I were to get up, I could post a photo every day on social media of me and a celebrity.
Sure.
Because I know them all, okay? And powerful people around the world, here's me with this guy, and here's me with this girl, and here's me with this rock star, and here's me with... And what would it do? Does that build Saddleback Church? No. All it does is create competition and actually create resentment. Well, who do you think you are? You think you're so cool. You think you're so hot. I don't know anybody like that, okay? And so I never push a self-promoting photo or a success in my life. What I do is, if I do talk about me, and I don't think that's the primary purpose of social media. I'll talk about that in a minute. If I do promote, I talk about a weakness, a hurt, a need. And then people go, oh, well, if Rick went through that and God used him, then maybe God could use me. Yeah. When I share my pain, losing a son to suicide, when I share my pain, the struggle Kay and I had in our marriage, when I share going through a depression or going through a discouragement, people go, it binds us. Yeah. It unites us. Successes don't unite us, but pain does. So here's how you use social media. Use it to encourage people in pain. And if you do that, you'll build a church. Okay, now let me explain the basis for this. It's the parable of the sower. Jesus told the parable of the sower. It's so important, it's in 3 different passages. Okay? It's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The parable of the sower is the key to the Great Commission, and the parable of the sower is the key to growing your church. Now, Jesus said that there are 4 kinds of soil represent 4 kinds of heart. The hard soil represent the hard heart that's totally resistant to the gospel. It doesn't even get a chance to penetrate. The shallow soil represents a shallow heart that responds emotionally, but when the heat's on, it has no root, so it dies. The soil with weeds is the distracted heart, and the cares and the riches and being cool is more important than being holy. And the cares and riches of this thing choke out the life of the gospel. And so it doesn't grow. The 4th soil is the good soil where the seed is planted and it gets exponential growth, 30, 60, 100-fold. Now, if that is true, and of course it is because Jesus told it, it means that at any given moment in your community, 75% of the people are non-responsive. Okay, just saying, I don't care what city you are and what world you're in, 3 out of 4 people around you couldn't care less about the gospel.
Yep.
Okay. So, if I'm a smart farmer, I'm going to maximize my seed on the good soil. I'm not going to waste it on the 75% where it doesn't get any results. That's bad stewardship. Good stewardship is to plant the maximum soil in the best seed. Best seed in the best soil. Now, here's the question. Okay, if 75% are not worth focusing on right now, first, it's not my responsibility to prepare the soil. That's the Holy Spirit. I can't prepare a heart. I can't soften a heart. I can't change a heart. My job is to see the soft heart and plant the seed as a good farmer. It's God's job to prepare the soil. Now, here's the big question. How does God turn hard soil into soft soil? Mm-hmm. Huh. He sends a storm. Yeah. He sends the rain. And he pounds it with rain. C.S. Lewis said, God whispers to us in our pleasure. He shouts to us in our pain. Pain is God's megaphone. So if I'm in a city in Pasadena, California, and I've had a church there for 50 years, the guy who's lived next door and for 20 years has said no, he's going to keep saying no. until he gets in pain. One day, his wife's going to die. One day, he's going to get the dreaded word cancer. One day, he gets fired. One day, his child has a scandal. One day, he is going to be broken by pain. And that's when you have the opportunity to plant the seed. But you've been building a bridge of love all this time. But you're not focusing on the people. I've been telling pastors for 50 years, if you'll just focus on people in pain, you'll grow a church. You don't have to focus on anybody. And it's God's job to make people have pain. And everybody eventually gets there because nobody gets to go through life pain-free. So even the most self-centered, successful, young professional who thinks, I don't need God, is one day going to fall flat on his face. What? Sorry.
No. I mean, we got a lot to cover, but that's a fascinating
so
take
focus
on
on people in pain, and you'll grow a church. Don't focus on anybody else. There are plenty of people out there in pain. And guess what? Next year, there'll be other people in pain who weren't in pain this year. And next year, there'll be somebody else. If you just focus on the 25% in pain, you'll grow a church.
What else, if you were starting over again? Would you do the same, or would you do differently if you were planting Saddleback?
Well, I made a mistake early on that I don't think many guys are making today. And that is, I underestimated the value of music.
Oh, okay.
I did not realize how important music is to the growth of your church. And so in the early time, our music was K on the piano. Okay.
Yeah.
That was it. That was our band. All right. And I knew we could. The hymns didn't make sense, so I was rewriting the words of the hymns, but we were still singing hymns when we first started. And then we started a band, and then when we first started out, we tried to appeal to everybody's taste. Okay, and so one minute we'd do a rock song, then we'd do a country western song, then we'd do an easy listening song, then a Bill Gaither song, then a classical, then a jazz, then a reggae, then a rap. And you know what kind of audience we had? Nobody. All we did is make everybody mad. If you go to, what radio station would have an audience if they played a different kind of style every time?
True.
They would have no audience. Okay, now, in your family, I had 5 people in my family, we listened to 5 different radio stations. So trying to please everybody with your music is impossible. Tell me the kind of music you're using, and I'll tell you who you're reaching right now without having ever been to your church, and I'll tell you who you're never going to reach. Just tell me the style of music you're using. I'll tell you who you're never going to reach, and I'll tell you who you are going to reach. And what happens today is now, so what I did is I actually passed out a card to everybody in church and said, tell me the call letters of the radio station you listen to.
There you go.
Okay, and when I got it back, it was overwhelmingly contemporary, adult, middle of the road. Mm-hmm. It wasn't heavy metal, okay? It wasn't hip hop. Now in different places that might be, if you got a heavy metal church or a hip hop church, fine. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying, once you decide the style of your music, you're determining who you're going to reach and who you'll never reach. Far more people will listen to your sermon from different backgrounds. But the moment you determine music is not only half of your service, it's the first half. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, before you even get up to speak, they've already decided whether they're going to come back or not. Because this is not. So when people come to your church, the first 2 questions they ask are not theological. They're sociological. The first 2 questions they ask are not theological or sociological. Nobody comes and says, do they believe in God here? Do they believe? Nobody's asking that. The first question they ask is this question. Is there anybody here like me? Yeah. Okay. So a farmer looks around, are there any other farmers? A young married couple with pushing a stroller, any other couples with a stroller? A Vietnamese person, look, any other Vietnamese in here? A military guy goes, anybody else got a military haircut? Elderly couple, any other senior citizens in here? We naturally look for people like us in a congregation. If we see somebody like us, we're more likely to stay. If we don't, we're more likely to leave. Right. Now, when we started Saddleback, we were a pretty homogeneous group. Everybody at the church pretty much looked like me. Young, white, and drop-dead sexy. Okay? Now, none of that's true anymore. Now we're Baskin-Robbins 51 flavors. We intentionally, 22 years ago, said we're going to be a multicultural church. And we actually changed one of the values in our name from atmosphere of acceptance to all-nation congregation. How do you develop a multi-church, multi-ethnic church? You put whatever you want on stage.
Right.
Okay? If you look at our worship team, and now you look at Saddleback, we are the most diverse church in North America. We speak 168 languages. 168 languages. Most of my campus pastors aren't white guys. I have 20 black staff. I have Asian staff, ministers, pastors. I have Asian staff. I have Middle Eastern staff. I have an Indian pastor from India. We have Latin American pastors. And not just one kind of Hispanic. We got every kind of Hispanic. Why? Well, we're in Southern California, of course, which is very multicultural. But while I've got 196 languages in our church, there are about 100 more of that in Southern California. So we got a lot farther to go. But what you attract, what you have is what you'll attract more of. And if you're going to get more, you got to intentionally go after them.
What would you change about your leadership? You look back at young Rick.
Yeah.
You look at what you've learned over 4 decades. We have a lot of young
leaders. Oh, I don't think anything.
leaders.
I think I did everything correctly.
Good.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
next question.
you got like 10-hour podcast?
We got a lot of
Yeah, okay, so what would I do differently? Oh, baby, so many things. One of them I did say is we didn't put enough emphasis on music at first.
Yeah.
And when we went after that, I started seeing, well, that's important. I would say one...
Because you talked about staff health. Let's go there.
What's
you
that?
said not all of our staff have been healthy at all seasons.
Oh, yeah, right.
And when I read the comments on my blog, on my site, I see a lot of people fleeing toxic staffs, environments. And I would say, I'll go first. There were times where I led the staff and it wasn't very healthy. So what have you learned in that respect?
Well, here's the thing. John Maxwell once talked about, he said, if on a scale of 1 to 10, you're a 7 leader or an 8 leader, then you're going to tend to hire 6s, okay? People who are not as with it as you are. You're not going to tend to hire people who are smarter than you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that person, the 6 hires a 4, and the 4 hires a 3, okay? And I remember looking one time at my children's staff. This is years ago. 35 years ago.
No one named.
No, nobody names it. And a long time ago. And I was looking at them and go, how in the world did they get on my staff? Well, I was not involved. I'm a pretty hands-off leader. I'm not a micromanager. But one thing I would say, Pastor, you should be involved in is you should have a good process for qualifying staff. Yeah. Okay, now, I'm not a good qualifier because I tend to believe everybody can do it. I believe you can do it. I don't see your negatives. I'm going to sell you on the job whether you're the right person or not. That's just the way I am. My wife has antenna. Okay, she is discerning. And you need to find who are the discerning people in your church. And it could be some members who are very discerning, and it could be some people who are already on staff, and they pass through them before they get to you, and you have final approval, but by the time they get to me, they've already been clarified and qualified. But in the early days, we didn't do that, and let me just say it this way. It's better to have no staff than the wrong staff.
Yeah.
It's better to have no staff than the wrong staff. I remember for the first 5 years of the church, people said, when are we going to have a youth group? I said, well, when God brings the right person. I said, wait a minute, we didn't have the leader. When the leader comes, we'll start it. We went 7 years without a singles ministry. Why? The wrong leader will cause you more in pain than no leader at all. And so don't get in a hurry for staff. I think that's a mistake I made early on. Sure. At some point, when you're first starting out as a church plant, the qualifications for leadership is you have to have a warm body and a pulse. Okay, and if so, you can serve in our church.
Right.
Now, for instance, gentlemen, you got to go through all kinds of background checks. You got to do blood tests. There's all kinds of. Here's the thing. How do you know when a church is getting bigger? Simple. The attendance is bigger. How do you know when a church is getting more mature? This is a different question. And I think we should talk about some of those measurements.
Yeah.
But one of the tests of mature is the standards for leadership get tougher. To be a leader at Saddleback is far more tougher today as a volunteer or a staff than it was years ago.
Let's talk about metrics, because that was on my list of things I wanted to talk about.
All right.
So COVID, the last 2 years, has thrown a bomb into everything.
Yeah.
I talked to a group of pastors a couple weeks ago when I was here in California, and I said, if you could wave a magic wand, and other than please bring my church back to where it was 2 years ago, which everybody wants.
Everybody wants.
Everybody wants, Rick. I said, what would you want? And one of them, African-American friend who preaches in Atlanta, said, I would just love to know metrics. Like we used to be able to look at attendance and giving, and we knew that, it doesn't tell the whole story, but at least lets us know where we stand. Now we don't seem to know anymore. When you think about metrics, and Barna, who we're doing this as a joint production with, they measure things like vocation and spiritual health, emotional health, relational health, et cetera, that kind of thing. What do you think some metrics for the new age should be?
Okay, first place, let's just think of what is the church. The church is a body, not a business. It is an organism, not an organization. It is a family, it is a flock, it is a relationship. So organizational metrics need to not be business metrics, because we're not a business. They need to be body metrics. Now, you say, well, how do you measure stuff in the body? Doctors do it all the time. I go to a doctor's office, he puts a thermometer in my mouth, writes down a number. He looks in my ear, writes down a number, looks in my eyes, he takes my pulse, writes down a number. He does blood work, writes down a number, takes my blood pressure, writes down. Obviously, it's easy to quantify biological health. So if the physical body can be measured for health, then there must be measurements for the spiritual body too. We just haven't been using them. Now, a little background. The Bible teaches very clearly that there are 5 purposes for our church. These 5 purposes are explained in Acts 2. They are prayed by Jesus. They're modeled in Acts 2. They're prayed for by Jesus in John 17. They are explained by Paul in Ephesians 4. They're shown all through the New Testament, but they're best expressed in the 5 verbs of the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. A great commitment to the Great Commandment and the Great Commission is all you need to know about church health. If you will practice the 5 verbs of the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, you'll grow a healthy church. Now, what are they? In the Great Commandment, he says first, love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. The Bible word for that is worship. Carey, worship is simply expressing my love to God. Okay? Whether I do it by myself or in a small group or with 100 people in a congregation. Worship is expressing my love to God. Offering my body as a living sacrifice. This is your reasonable worship. Worship is not music. This is a pet peeve of mine. First we had the worship, then we had the sermon. As if the sermon's not worship, the offering's not worship, the prayer's not worship, the invitation's not worship, the silence is not worship. Only music is. There's no such thing as Christian music.
Okay, so worship.
There's only Christian lyrics. If I put on a song and you didn't hear no words, you wouldn't know if it's a Christian song or not. So worship is the first purpose. Okay, worship is the first purpose. And that's the number 1 purpose of our life. Love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. So we teach people we are to be a worshiping body. Then it says, love your neighbor as yourself. The Bible word for that is either service or ministry. Diakonia. When you serve, when you love your neighbor as yourself, you are ministering to them. You are serving them. It's the diakonia is the word. It is the service. So from the Great commandment, we get worship and service. We are to love God, and we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. We are to worship and to serve. And Jesus said, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Now, worship always comes before service. Service doesn't precede worship. Service comes out of worship.
Okay, so worship, service.
Yeah. Now we go to the Great Commission, and we get the other three verbs, or the three commands. Go make disciples, that's evangelism. Teach them to do everything I've commanded you, that's discipleship. And in the middle, he says, oh, by the way, baptize them. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Baptism is a symbol of incorporation. The Bible says we're baptized into the body of Christ. Baptism is not just a symbol of salvation, it's a symbol of fellowship. We are baptized as belongers into the body of Christ. It is the putting on of the armor. It is the putting on. It's saying, I'm no longer a spectator, I'm a participator. Baptism is the entry to the church that says, I'm one of you. And we say, I'm a believer. We really, more accurately, you should say, I'm a belonger. Because we are called not just to believe, we're called to belong. In fact, all five of these purposes, we are called to honor God through worship, okay?
Yeah.
And we're called to love our neighbors ourselves through through ministry. We are to make disciples, evangelism. We are to mature disciples through teaching them to do everything I commanded you. And we are to mark them, the disciples, baptize them into the fellowship. So baptism is a symbol of fellowship. We're not just, one of the biggest problems today is we have a lot of people who are believers who aren't belongers. People who say, I love Jesus, I still don't need the church. That's nonsense. That's the most immature statement you can say. It means you don't have the slightest idea about the church. The church, Jesus died for the church. Yeah. That's how important it is. It's like saying, I love you, but I hate your body. Or I love you, but I hate your wife. You'd be offended. And so fellowship, worship, discipleship, ministry, and evangelism are the five purposes of the church. Going back to the metrics. That was all prelim.
Yeah.
That was all prelim. Okay. We need a metric or metrics for each of these five purposes.
Right.
How do you measure worship? I can tell you. How do you measure discipleship? We figured out some of those ways. How do you measure ministry? Okay. How do you measure evangelism? And how do you measure fellowship and ministry? Well, for instance, on fellowship, we know how many people are in a small group. Okay, how many people are in a small group meeting regularly on that small group? How often do they meet? If you have more than 60 people in your church, Sunday is a crowd. It's not real fellowship. In fellowship, less is more. 10 is better than 20. 6 is better than 10.
So you start looking for metrics like that.
Yes.
And you it's interesting because you are a counter.
Yes.
When we toured your office, I mean, you had this nice little display, 50,000 baptisms, you're at 52 now. You know your numbers.
Right.
So you think maybe look beyond just Sunday attendance and start saying number of people in groups, number of people you're baptizing.
Yes, well, exactly. And in worship, I want to know how many people in my church are having a quiet time.
How do you track that?
We have a covenant. Now, one of the things that we've done is in our series of courses, we have a class called Discovering Membership in the Body of Christ. We have called Discovering the Habits for Spiritual Growth. We have a class called Discovering My Shape for Ministry. And we have a class that is Discovering My Life Mission in the World. That's for the first four purposes. We know we can track, and in each of those classes, there's material taught, habits that are taught that they'll use the rest of their life, but there's a covenant. We have a membership covenant, a maturity covenant, a ministry covenant, and a mission covenant. I can tell you how many tithers I have in my church. I can tell you how many people are in small groups in my church. I can tell you how many people are having a quiet time in my church. That's the pulse. And it's not enough to just do nickels and noses. Okay.
Right.
Now, giving is a discipleship stat. It's a discipleship
But not
stat.
the only one.
But it's not the only one.
So in many ways, by measuring that quantifiably,
Yes.
you're also
Yes.
looking at the qualitative making reasonable guesses about the state of the health. Now, you
Yes.
want to talk emotional.
Well, and you can do an annual survey on that.
Okay.
You can do an annual survey of your church to take the temperature. One other thing, your church is not mature until it's had a baby. The mark of physical maturity, when a little girl goes through puberty, she becomes a woman when she has the ability to reproduce. A little boy becomes a man when he goes through puberty, he has the ability to reproduce. Your church, I don't care how much doctrine it knows, if it hadn't had a baby, you don't have the ability to reproduce, you're not mature.
Right.
Now, this is a statistic. I want to change the statistic from the 100 largest churches in America. I just soon throw that one out the door, okay? We've been on it, but I couldn't care. I don't even read them. What I want to know is, how many churches did you start? And I would like to change the metrics from, I would rather have a church of 75 that planted 2 other churches than see a church of 1,000. Any day, because they're going to reach more people. And so we need to change, and we need to reward the multiplying churches, not the big single-cell churches. Typically in denominations, the pastors who get invited to preach at the pastor conference are the pastors with the biggest crowd.
Right.
That just means they've got speaking gifts. That's all it means. That's all it means. But what I want to know is, I want to reward the church that is still at 100, but they've started 5 churches in 20 years. Okay? Where's the reward for those people?
That's a great question.
We need to change the metric of what gets rewarded, because what gets rewarded gets repeated.
Emotional and mental well-being.
This is the most missing element, Carey, in the church today.
Yeah.
It is caring
Well, you've been through it.
Caring for the emotional health of our members and caring for the mental health of our members. How is it that somebody can sit under the gospel for 30 years in a church and still be cantankerous and mean and self-centered and as mean as all get out? There's a likelihood of they've been hurt, and that hurt's never been healed. Okay.
So when you see the angry person, you see the pain.
Oh, yeah. In fact, when you see an angry person, look past and go, don't ask what's wrong with you. Here's the question. Write down this question. Don't ask what's wrong with you. Ask, what happened to you?
Right.
That's the most important question. What happened to you? Because everything has a reason behind it. And a lot of times when people get angry at you as a pastor and they're upset, they're just reacting to authority. And they never have solved the issue with some authority in their life, where they were misused, abused, or were never allowed to say their idea. They had a dad that would not ever admit he was wrong, like that. I honestly believe today one of the most effective forms of evangelism in today's society is what I call apology evangelism. And in apology evangelism, it is you admit to people your fear of talking with them. For instance, let me give you an example. Every one of you have neighbors that have lived by you for 10 years, and you've never talked to them about the Lord.
True story.
Okay, everybody, they've lived by you, and you've never talked about the Lord. And now you feel embarrassed to talk to them about the Lord. Here's what I recommend you do. You go to that person and you say, Bob, I need to apologize to you. And he goes, yeah. No, I really feel bad about this. I need to apologize. Well, yeah, what? I said, well, Bob, first let me just say, I'm sorry. I was afraid what you'd think of me. And I was afraid, I've never told you about the most important thing in my life. We've lived next to each other for 10 years. And I was afraid to tell you about it because I thought you'd think less of me. I should have known better. Wow. You're a better friend than that. Would you please forgive me? The guy's now going, tell me what is? Of course, I'm a follower of Jesus, and it's the most important thing in my life. And my past was forgiven, and I got a purpose for living, and I got a home in heaven, and I've never talked to you about it. I'm sorry. Would you forgive me? That is the way to get to the hardened secular person. Yeah. You don't start with, I know it all, but you start with an apology. And so that had to do, I don't know how we got off on that, but from the emotional health and the mental health of people, pastors, we need to care more about, people can have this much head knowledge of Scripture, but the hurt is this high. Yeah. And we've never dealt with the emotional pain in their life or the mental struggles and the mental illnesses they're struggling with. And we expect, well, just pray about it. That's about as mean a thing as you can say to somebody struggling with mental illness.
You've been through a lot.
Yeah.
Matthew's mental illness. And
I watched it firsthand for 27 years.
His death by suicide.
Yeah.
Kay's cancer.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and you've been very public about it, but you have been through periods of feeling depressed yourself.
Oh, of course.
Right.
No. And in fact, never waste pain. Okay. If I'm depressed, I'm going to tell my church about it, and I'm going to tell them in the moment, and I'm going to tell them how I'm dealing with it. And I'll say, I'm discouraged right now, and here's what I'm discouraged about, but this is what I'm working through. If all of our testimonies are after the fact, they lose the smell of the fire. They don't smell authentic. It's in the moment where you go, guys, this last 90 days, I was in excruciating physical pain. I went through, who knows, they still don't even know what it was, but I got some kind of virus that has inflamed all the major muscles of my body. I couldn't sleep. I had to be hospitalized. I couldn't walk. I couldn't exercise. I could barely stand, barely sit. Couldn't preach for 3 months. I could sit behind a table and speak one service to play the video. But this last Sunday was the first time I stood behind the pulpit in 3 months. And finally, the medicine's working. But I didn't hide that from people. I said, guys, I'm in a lot of pain right now. And you've been praying for me. I need you to, I pray for you. You pray for me. But I also have done that with emotional things. When my brother died, when you're going through grief. When Matthew died, of course, we were very open about that.
Yeah, and again, I am sorry for Matthew's passing.
Thank you.
Was that natural for you? Was that a decision when Matthew died? That
By the time Matthew died, I had already learned that our greatest ministry will come out of our deepest hurt. I had already learned that, so I knew. Now, that doesn't make it easier.
No.
I still want my son back.
Yeah.
Okay, I still want but did I know that? Here's the point. Pain is inevitable. Misery is not. Misery is optional. Pain is inevitable. And if you're going to go through pain, you may as well use it to help other people. That's called redemptive pain. So I'm not going to waste my pain. So anytime I go through any kind of pain, Paul says in the New Testament, he says, we loved you so much, we gave to you not only the gospel of God, but we shared our very own lives. Yeah. That's the incarnational part of preaching, where the word becomes fresh and flesh. And it comes not through, again, I don't share all my stories of success. Okay, there are articles come out that go, that's a good article. I never pass it on to the members. Yeah. Never. Okay, but I do pass on when I'm in pain.
I watched you do this a couple weeks ago. Tony, my wife, and I, we were at Saddleback, and so this is first weekend of December, late November.
Oh, got it.
And you came out. I thought you were going to preach.
Yeah.
So a couple of things struck me.
Yeah.
Number one,
yeah.
how warm you were. You came out, you're just like, hey, everybody.
Yeah,
everyone's
right.
cheering. You're like, sit down, sit down, sit down.
Yeah.
You just kind of stood up there and you prayed for people. But then you said, hey, I've been in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And I need you to pray for me.
Yeah.
And then you gave like a mini sermonette.
Yeah.
And then you said, if you're in pain in the congregation, emotional, financial, relational pain, medical pain, stand up. You did the biggest pastoral prayer I've seen in a church service, Rick. And it was moving.
Yeah.
It was so moving.
Well, I'm in pain, and I know that they're in pain, so I can fellowship with them.
And you said, after you prayed, you said, listen, I'm still in pain. It's too painful for me to do 5 services. So I shot this earlier in the week.
Right.
I'm going to go now,
but
you're going to watch me on video.
Right.
And then you kind of waved and you walked off. And I thought, I can see you doing that if you're a church planter.
Yeah.
But to do that after 42 years, when you could have just as easily had said, guys, run the video, or get a guest, I'm staying home.
Right.
How do you stay that engaged for that long?
The only way you can stay engaged is to genuinely love people. If ultimately your motive is not love for God and love for people, you won't last in ministry. It's just too hard. Okay, it's just too. If you're in, I don't honestly know a single pastor who's in it for money. People talk about all those money grubbing. Believe me, if I wanted to make money, there's 1,000 easier ways to make money than pastoring and dealing with the 24-hour being on call. And I still do hospital visits, and I do funerals, and I do, people think, well, he must not do any of that pastoral care. That's how you keep your credibility. Okay? And a lot of guys don't really, the problem is they don't want to be pastors. They want to be preachers. And what they would like is a vacuum tube where they study all week and hermetically or sucked over to the pulpit and they preach, and then as soon as they finish, they hermetically back to their study. Then go be a professor. Okay? Pastor means you care. Pastor means you love. And that means you spend time with people. And I still spend a lot. I spent one day this last month while I was in pain, 4 hours calling people in pain from home. Just calling people in pain, staff members and members. And calling, I've had 4 of my staff members, key staff members, die in the last year. And they were all elders. I've had 4 elders die. They were all full-time pastors. They're combined over 120 years of service at Saddleback. I personally feel responsible for their widows. I call their widows, and I call them and say, how you doing? What do you need? I told Glenn I'd take care of you. How can I help you? What do you need? That kind of stuff gives you credibility that honestly, when you genuinely love people, now you can fake love for 2 years. You can't fake it for 42. People figure out you either love them or you don't. But they know I love them. And if I were to say, let's charge hell with squirt guns, they'd say, sure, why not? Let's go. First, I have a track record. But more than that, they know I love them. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And you can't go wrong with that. You can't go wrong. Laying down your life for the sheep. You can't expect people to accept your vision if you're not giving into their life.
The other thing that amazes me, we have seen so many pastors fail morally. You've seen a lot of friends, a lot of people.
They didn't put up the guardrails.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Why do you think we see so many, and I'm sure small church pastors fail too, it's just the big ones make the news.
No, they make the news.
Yeah, so what's going on there?
Well, and because they're bigger targets, Satan wants to take them down. A guy in a less known church doesn't have as big an impact for causing pain to the body of Christ. The only thing good we can say about Satan is that he doesn't have any new temptations. He doesn't have any new plans. He's used the same ones since creation. And the same 3 temptations he gave to Adam and Eve, he gave to Moses, that's in Hebrews 10, Hebrews 11, he gave to Abraham, he gave to David. They're the same 3 temptations of Jesus in the wilderness, and I could trace them all the way through. They're passion, possession, and position, or sex, salary, and status, or the temptation to be, the temptation to have, and the temptation to feel. They are best explained in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. Now, the guy who wrote 1 John also wrote John.
Right.
And in John 3:16, he says, God so loved the world. And then in 1 John 2:16, 15, 16, he says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. Now, well, which is it? God so loved the world, but I'm not supposed to love the world. The answer is the definition of the word world. And when God loved the world, he's talking about the people of the world. And in 1 John 2:16, when he says, love not the world, he's talking about the value system of the world. Because he said in the very next verse, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, are not of the Father, they're of the devil. We are to love the people of the world and hate the value system.
Right.
Okay. The problem is today, as Christians, we do the exact opposite.
Ooh. We
hate the people and we love the value system. We are as materialistic and hedonistic and secular as they are, but we hate the people. We've got it reversed. We've got it reversed. We are to love the people, Democrats and Republicans. I am not allowed to hate anybody. I am to love my enemy. I am to love the communist or the Muslim or the gay person or the person who hates me or anybody who's different than me. I am not allowed to hate anybody. I cannot do that and call myself a Christian. On the other hand, I am to hate the value system. Now, lust of the flesh is the temptation to feel. I want to feel good. It's no more than sex. It's and when you're, one of the reasons Satan works on big time pastors more is because the emotional drain is larger the more services you do and things like that. Okay. And when you're drained, they say, oh, I deserve this. I deserve to look at pornography. I deserve this drink. I deserve that. What, I'm doing so much for God. That's a lie out of the pit of hell. Okay, it's a lie. But and when you're tired, you're most vulnerable. Jesus was tempted after 40 days of fasting.
Oh yeah.
Okay, he's wasted. He's tired. Okay, now when Satan comes and says, "Turn these stones to bread," what's wrong with Jesus eating bread? Nothing. Nothing. He's hungry. There's nothing wrong with him eating bread. What's the problem here? He's saying, use the gift I gave you for ministry to feed yourself. I've never been tempted to turn stones to bread. Why? I don't have that gift. You will not be simply tempted in your weakness. You will be tempted in your greatest strength.
So when you look back at your life, I stepped out of the lead pastor role after 20 years, and a friend of mine messaged me, and he said, 20 years without a scandal, that's something these days. And I'm like, gosh, I never thought of it. But 42 years.
You have to put the guardrails up.
Yeah, what are your guardrails?
Well, because you need guardrails against all three kinds of sin. Now, the first one we installed was what's called Saddleback 10 Commandments, which was literally a list of 10 things you cannot do if you're on the staff of our church.
Okay.
I wrote those and we adopted them in 1986 during the Jim Bakker and Swaggart scandals.
So wow.
Yeah. So during Baker and Swaggart, I said, that is not going to happen here. Now, one of my mentors was Billy Graham, and he told me about the Billy Graham rule. I have never personally been in a room with a woman who is not my wife, with the door closed, ever in 50 years, except in a doctor's office with a nurse.
Right.
Okay. Where she would have that. I've never been in a room with a woman who's not my wife, with the door closed. My secretary was my greatest protector when she was my secretary for 20 years. I've had a male assistant for 20 years now. Harriet and I would not go down in the elevator together. Okay, and who's going to go first? We wanted to be. I remember, and I remember telling this to Bill Hybels back in the 80s. I warned him. I said, Bill, I think you're flirting with fire. The way you travel with female staff and the way you don't hold up lines. And I gave him my Saddleback 10 Commandments. His response to me was, Rick, you're going overboard. That's what he told me. And I looked at him in the eye and I said, Bill, I'd rather go overboard than be thrown overboard.
Oh, wow.
And he was thrown overboard. And I had told him, I said, if I'm driving down the street and I see a female member of my staff, or female member of my church with a flat tire on the side of the road, I don't stop and help her. I will call AAA and make sure she gets the help, but I'm not going to, I want to live in such a way that nobody goes, well, I saw Rick with a woman, not his wife, on the freeway. Yeah. I want to live in such a way people have to make up stuff about me to criticize me. Well, I found out they do. They do. But not in that area.
Right.
Not in that area. Okay. But you also need it in the lust of the eyes, which is materialism. And you need it You need guardrails in the pride of life, which is humility. And for instance, some of my guardrails, one of the guardrails are why I don't spend so much time on social media. It's not good for my ego. Okay? It appeals to my ego to write something and then have people applaud it. Okay? So I don't need that in my life. So today, the pride of life, a lot of it has to do with social media. Yeah. And the way, are you trying to look cool? Who are you trying to impress? The other thing, but on the money thing, when Satan takes Jesus out and says, all these things will I give you if you fall down and worship me. What is that? That's the temptation to sell your ministry for profit. And it is when you say, I'm not going to say this Sunday because that member out there is influential and he's going to loan me his condo for vacation. Okay, he's got a condo, and I can't afford a condo. But he's got.
Therefore, I'm not going to say that.
I'm not. I'm going to limit my message in order. I'm going to sell out in order to please the wealthy person in the church. And there are lots of ways that people do that. The third way, the guardrail, is on the pride of life. Jesus is taken up on the pinnacle of the temple, and Satan goes, "Hey, jump off the temple." And it'll be really cool. Everybody will applaud you. They'll say, glory to God. It's God. It's really cool. Yay, God. Yay, Jesus. You are the Son of God. What's wrong with Jesus getting glory? Nothing. What's wrong with Jesus being recognized as the Son of God? Nothing. It's how it was being done. The path to glory is through the cross, not through showing off. And we will be tempted to do the spectacular in ministry to show off. We will be tempted to show off by doing something really cool and be like, hey, watch this, those smoking whistles and blowing around. And it's just so subtle that you have to I'm not going to do that on social media. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to read my own press releases. And I'm not going to promote myself like that. And I'm not going to do this and that. And when you do that, again, it goes back to the anointing of God. Promotion comes neither from the east or the west, it comes from the Lord. And so when God finds somebody who goes, I'm going to build guardrails on these things, then he goes, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, that he may show himself strong in the behalf of those whose hearts are perfect toward him. I have discovered, Carey, that you don't have to be perfect to be super blessed, obviously. You don't have to be sinless to be. God isn't interested in your sin as much as he is in the direction of your heart. I blow it all the time. And there are times I'm prideful. There are times I'm materialistic. There are times I could be tempted in other areas. I have not stumbled in the area of sex, but it's because it's not how close to the fire can I get, not get burned. It's how far away can I be from it?
Can it possibly be?
And God willing, I'm going to finish that the only woman I've ever known is my wife. And I can say that. But in that, I have to say, Lord, let him who stands take heed lest he fall. Here's the biggest thing. Given the right situation, I'm capable of anything. Yeah. The heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. That's what the Bible says. That means you lie to yourself more than you lie to anybody else. I lie to myself more than I lie to anybody else. My biggest lies aren't to other people. My biggest lies are to me.
I really appreciate what you're saying. Yeah. And, I echo that prayer that we can finish well, that you will finish well. One of the criticisms I've heard, Rick, of the Billy Graham rule, and I mean, Billy did finish well.
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah. No. Is that women say, well, that's not fair. It creates, a bit of, not a misogynist environment, but you might mentor me if I was a male campus pastor,
right,
one-on-one, but you're never going to do that with a female director,
right.
And it stifles people in the organization.
And I think they misunderstood, and of course, I have ordained pastors, women on my staff,
right?
Okay, which created a lot of controversy too. Half of my staff is women. Okay,
right.
The difference is it's not that I'm afraid of them; I'm afraid of me. Okay, it's not, they've done nothing wrong. It's a matter of, given the right situation, I could be guilty of anything. So I don't trust my own heart. And so I have to explain to them, this doesn't really have anything about to do with you. It has to do with my own propensity to sin, my own propensity to deny that I'm a human being, okay, and that I am fallen, I'm broken, and I simply, the Bible is very clear about this in Titus 2, that the older women are to disciple the younger women, and the older men are to disciple the younger men. And now in the scripture, Paul tells Timothy, treat the older men in your church, that's older in the Lord, as fathers. Treat the older women in your church as mothers. Treat the younger women in your church as sisters, and treat the younger men in your church as brothers. I have, there was a period in my life when the church where I had identified 5 fathers in the church. These were guys who had been Christians longer than me. And I went to each of those guys and I said, look, we don't have a board. There's no election here. But if you see anything in my life that's out of base, you come to me and you have the right to speak in and say, Warren, correct this. Right. And I told, they were spiritual, they had been Christians longer than me. Now, I've been a Christian now 62 years. So I don't have any spiritual fathers in the church anymore. I think I'm the oldest one. I have tons of spiritual sisters. And I have spiritual sisters who come to me and say, Rick, have you ever thought about this from a female viewpoint? No, and you're right. And I write it down. And there are women who speak into my life all the time as spiritual sisters. Lots of spiritual sisters, lots of spiritual brothers. I just don't have any spiritual mothers because I haven't found any woman in the church to admitting to be an older woman yet. They may be 85 years old, but they're still a spiritual sister.
Okay. And so you feel that way through mentoring, that's an opportunity for women on your staff?
I do. And our women pastors can mentor other women pastors.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
You and Kay have had your share of challenges in your marriage.
Oh, yeah. Especially the early years. Yeah.
What was that?
Well, we're the exact opposite in every single cell of our DNA. Okay, if I say hi, she says hello. If I say black, she says white. It's Tweedledee, Tweedledum. For the first 10 years of our marriage, there was an old Huey Lewis and the News song that we called, that was our theme song, called Happy to Be Stuck With You. Okay, and the truth is, we would have never gotten married if we had done it in the correct, do your Enneagram and do your premarital counseling and because any counselor,
keep away
any
from
counselor could have said, this marriage is no way it's going to work because we're the exact opposite in so many ways. I took Kay out on our first date, and 8 days later we were engaged.
Wow,
we were engaged before our second date. And I did not want to tell that to my kids for years because it's all the wrong way to do it. And then she moved during our engagement to Birmingham, Alabama to work in an inner city black church. And I moved to Nagasaki, Japan to plant a church in Nagasaki. And so we were separated our entire engagement. So when we got married, it's like we knew we were in love and we thought God had put us together, but who are you? And the first 2 years were hell on earth. And really, we did not get along. And I was teaching at a Christian college, and I was making $400 a month. And I said, we're gonna make this thing work if it kills us. Well, it nearly did. So we got a Christian counselor, and then 45 years ago, counseling was not as acceptable as it is today. You pastors didn't go get counseling. We went to a Christian counselor. It cost me $100 a month, and I'm making $100 a week, and I'm making $400 a month. Okay. So I got that wrong. I'm sorry. It cost me $400 a month. I was making $800 a month. So half of my income was going to it. So I put it on my MasterCard. I've often thought I should do a commercial said, a saved marriage, priceless. Okay. How much is your marriage worth? People say, I can't afford counseling. You can't afford not to get it. Yeah. How much is your happiness worth? I'd pay $1 million for my marriage today. I'm so in love with my wife, more in love with her than I've ever been in my life. And there would be no Saddleback, there'd be no Celebrate Recovery, there'd be no peace plan, there would be no purpose-driven life, there would be no blessing of over 1 million pastors in 164 countries if our marriage had crumbled. So I'm glad we stuck together. We now know that we would have never made it if we, of course, without the Lord. But we know that we would have never gotten together if we'd gone through premarital counseling and that. But God knew what we needed. And here's the thing. I've discovered when I used to do marriage counseling, the marriage is most in trouble where the people are most alike because they get bored with each other. The greater your differences in marriage, the greater your potential for spiritual growth and sanctification.
Oh, wow.
The greater your differences, the greater your potential for sanctification and spiritual growth. My wife, the Holy Spirit has used my wife more than anybody else to hone off my rough edges and to teach me things I wouldn't have learned any other way. And really, if you want to summarize marriage counseling in 2 words, it's this: grow up. Okay, grow up. I want what I want, you what you want, we're going to have conflict. And that's not going to work. But Jesus in me and Jesus in you is going to learn how to get along. But the lessons we learned from that helped me be a better leader.
Wow.
And helped shape me. So the marriage problems, now I would not have even considered planting a church in the first 2 years. Our marriage was so rocky. But by the year 5, when we planted, we had worked through a lot of that pain, and I felt like I could teach on marriage without being a hypocrite, okay? And I could share from our weaknesses, and we had grown enough from that, we could learn from that. So that's, who you choose as a spouse is an enormous, obviously, an enormous shaper of your life.
Rick, I don't know how this is possible, but we're at 90 minutes. And I feel like we have just barely scratched the surface. But I guess that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah, maybe. I've got a few ideas in here. They just wind me up. That's right, Tom. Just wind me up. And
But I'll tell you, I mean, maybe we could do a round 2 at some point.
I'd love to do that. I would happily love to do that. Here's the thing. I care about pastors. And I don't want to waste the mistakes I've made. I don't want to waste the pain I've gone through. And I don't even want to waste the successes that I've learned from. But I will tell you this. When I come down to it, I don't think I've learned anything through pleasure. Everything I've learned in life, I learned through pain.
Yeah.
And so if you're going through a tough time right now, as we kind of wrap this up, don't give up. Don't give up. How do you get to be an oak tree? An oak tree is just a little nut that refused to give its ground. Okay? Here's an interesting thing. All of the critics that I had when I started Saddleback and everything was so brand new, and it's like, we're not putting Babbitt in the name, and we're using a band, and we're stuff that's not even common now. I mean, so many things that everybody else is doing that nobody was doing when we started in 1980. And all those critics, all those guys have died. Okay, I outlasted my critics. So now I've got a whole new set of ones. And that is needed for my character development. And I actually can thank God for my critics because it's the secret of my empowerment and anointing.
Rick, I can't thank you enough. Well, people can find you on social, whether that's good or bad. Yeah. And they can find you at Saddleback. And then if they want to
let me just say this word about social media.
Yeah.
When Twitter first came out, a guy on my staff who was running our tech thing he knew about it way in advance.
Sure.
He wrote the Microsoft certification test, the guy who was leading my tech team. And he came to me one day and said, Rick, you're going to want to get on this. It's called Twitter, and you type in certain things, and you just tell people what's going on in your life. And I looked at him, and I said, that is the most narcissistic thing I could possibly think of. Why should I write, I just ate a burrito and passed gas? First, why should I write it? And second, why should you care? Okay. And second, look at how cool I am with this great food right here. I said, I can't think of anything that would stroke it more. So even though I stayed off it for like 2 years, in the first 2 years, but he secretly put me on there. And so one day I'm sitting doing the funeral up of a missiologist who had taught at Fuller Seminary, and I'm teaching this funeral with John Piper, Now, John is the least narcissistic guy that I know. And so we're sitting together, and John leans over to me in the funeral, sitting on the front stage. He goes, "Hey, Rick, I'm on Twitter." And I go, "What?" I just couldn't think of John Piper being on Twitter. And I go, "Why? Why are you on Twitter?" He goes, "Oh, I use it to mentor." Ding, light bulb. Now I have a purpose for social media. So if you're using to edify other people, go right ahead. But if you're using it to show off, stop it. Okay, that's it. That's my advice. We're over and out. God bless you, everybody.
With that, Rick, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carey.
Appreciate you.
All right.
Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at CareyNieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at CareyNieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before.